We are now joined at the desk by Mashale Phumaphi, who's the MD of Shumba Coal, to take us through the company's plans and their vision to tap into the regional energy market. Thank you so much for making the time to join us. Now, I was on your website and a lot of things caught my attention. One of the things that came out was, mining, beneficiation, and you're also looking at export coal projects. Now, would you say that you as a company are trying to position yourself to become a key player when it comes to the export market or energy?
Well, thank you, Tumisho. I would say both. What people don't realize is that Botswana has got the largest undeveloped coal resources on the African continent. So we work on the first mover basis and understanding that the market of coal is going to be large. So in the first instance, we want to address the regional and domestic energy deficit. We both know that we have gone through periods of load shedding. We've seen significant increases in electricity tariffs in the recent years. So I think in the first instance, we would like to produce coal to address that energy shortage. And then in the medium to long term, look at exporting coal, both for usage in the region. Last year you would have heard of the coal cliff that's coming in South Africa, whereby a lot of the aging mines will be cutting down on production, so Eskom's power supply needs a renewed source of coal. But also for export as well. We understand that China and India continue to be huge consumers of coal. So the short answer is we're looking at both power and export, and I think Botswana Coal going forward is going to start filling in that gap.
So you're obviously wanting to get involved in the Southern African power pool, so to speak. How much power are you hoping to be able to contribute into these companies, your Zimbabwe, Namibia, South Africa, or are you merely just going to be, just drops in the ocean in terms of, how energy hungry Southern Africa is?
I think it's a phased approach. Now, if you look at the size of the market and the deficit we're talking about, it's thousands of megawatts. However, producing power projects that size is quite complicated. You look at Mudupi, you look at Kusile, which are huge projects, 3,000 to 4,000 megawatts. However, there are significant challenges in building power stations that size. What we're saying is that we will start with a modular approach, 300 megawatts, and then increase slowly as the years go by. And that way, what you are doing is you are working with more of a tried and tested technology, and you are more certain of your market because you're actually feeding into a market where the deficit is in the thousands of megawatts, and you're producing a few hundred at a time.
So you have to get to these markets, and you're looking at railway as one of the ways of getting there. But would you say that you have the infrastructure in place that allows you to get your coal to where it needs to be?
The beautiful thing about what you call the Southern African Power Pool is that it's a regional power grid or network that has 9 member countries connected and 3 that are non-connected. But what that means is that an IPP, an independent power producer in Botswana, can be located in Botswana and sell power to anyone in those 9 countries. So you do not have to move the coal, which turns out to be more expensive. It's actually a lot cheaper to do what they say coal by wire, burn the coal where it is and transmit the energy. So I think for the regional power market, that is the preferred strategy. Obviously, if you're looking at exports abroad or exports to power stations elsewhere, then you'd look at using the existing railway lines or the new railway lines that are planned.
Let's look at the current regulation that's in place at the moment. You are in the extractive industry. I know that you're looking to get more licenses. If I do stand correct, I'm not sure if you're looking at an additional 4 in Botswana currently. What's the licensing process like and the regulatory environment in general when it comes to getting through some of the red tapes and regulations that you need to abide by?
Dumisho, I think out of my personal experience, I've done work in a number of African countries and elsewhere, and I think the pleasure of doing business in Botswana is that the regulation and the procedures are very clear-cut and straightforward. So everything is done by the book. In most cases, things occur on time. There may be some delays, but normally things occur in a manner and procedurally in such a way that, you know, as an end user or as a member of the private sector, you are quite comfortable and secure in the licensing regime.
Would you say this is the situation where you're saying it's easier for you when you're seeing right processes in place? Is this unique to Botswana, or is this something that we are seeing more prevalent on the African continent?
I think the predictability of licensing regimes varies from country to country. And as an investor, as a member of the private sector, what you want to do is see a consistency, stability. You want things to be security of tenure and security of procedures and protocol is very important. I would say Botswana is one of the top. In fact, in terms of corporate governance, we consistently as a country are ranked in the top 2 in Africa, with of course Mauritius being up there as well.
So you as a private investor or being in the private sector, are you finding that the government is giving you enough incentive to stay in the sector and keep driving economic growth forward?
I think, look, like with all other countries, there are challenges. What the government does do is they do try and put in places policies and schemes and structures that incentivize the private sector. What I can say, which is positive, is that they've been working very closely with us, members of the Botswana coal industry, in developing the sector. And, you know, we've seen significant strides in the last 12 months. For example, Botswana started exporting coal abroad for the first time ever last year. You saw that the government has allocated significant funds for for investment into transmission networks, which would bring stability to the network and mean that we've got more direct connections with our neighbors. So they have been positive in working with the private sector and also in actually investing in the sector. But although people think Botswana is rich, relative to the investment required in such projects, in rail projects, in mines, in power lines, where I would say the country itself cannot afford to pay for these by itself. So we do need a lot of external or regional investment from other players in order to assist us in developing these key sectors.